Hey friends, this is your host, film critic and comedian Nate Wyckoff, and I just want to remind you to like and subscribe and go ahead and recommend this podcast slash YouTube series to anyone you think might enjoy it, or people that you just don't like and you want to see them suffer through something you think they won't enjoy. Also, go to cultandclassicfilms.com and make sure you subscribe to get cult exclusive movies delivered in special editions to your door every month for dirt cheap. That's right. Our Patreon has awesome stuff you can get every month, as well as perks and discounts at our online store. And remember, you need to do this. Otherwise, our good friend, there you go, Sergeant Kabuki Man will be after you. And just a heads up, most people that go against him end up dead in weird ways. So make sure not to do that. Here's your show and enjoy.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, Fiends of the Pod, to another episode of Cult and Classic. As always, I am your host, Nate Wyckoff, comedian and writer for horrornews.net. With us, we have Tad Mastroianni. How you doing, Tad?
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. And Mandy Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
Pretty good. I am a zombie enthusiast, so I'm pretty psyched about this one.
We've got an awesome lineup here we'll get into. Greg Johnson is also with us. How are you doing, Greg?
Legally you're not supposed to talk to me, right?
Nah. More than 500 feet away. As always, I want to let you guys know that if you enjoy Cult and Classic podcast, please support us by writing reviews on your favorite podcast storage site. Listening is great. Referring to your friends is even better. And join our Patreon at patreon.com/Cult and Classic podcasts for as little as $1 a month. You get extra videos, plus you get videos of all of our episodes, including most of our interview episodes. We've got some really exciting ones coming up, so keep listening, and we'll get to that later. This week, we have rock and roll murder is the theme, and we've got two awesome movies here that I think will divide some people, but they're awesome to talk about. We have 2009's DIABLO CODY written Jennifer's Body with Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried. And then we have 1985's cult classic Hard Rock Zombies with No One featuring Nothing. Super, super excited. Now, there are some people in there that we'll recognize, and we'll talk about those. Very excited. So we're going to jump right in here. Jennifer's Body. First, did anybody, Mandy, you said you saw it in theaters. Did anybody else seen this movie before?
No.
Okay. I also saw it in theaters.
This is actually, I actually have this still on DVD.
Oh.
In a box in my attic. Like it exists. So.
It's been released several times on several platforms with several different covers. If you're watching our Patreon, you'll have my favorite teaser poster here of a sort of drawing of Megan Fox's face licking blood. It's very accurate to the film's vibe. So the film centers around two high school friends in a very satirical, heavy-handed, middle America, very Midwest style town. You can tell by the interiors of the houses with the wood paneling, everything is stuck in 1970s. But Amanda Seyfried plays sort of the mousy friend to the bossier hot girl of the school, Megan Fox. And they go to see a band from the city play at some podunk little bar, and the bar ends up burning down, and the band takes Megan Fox's character to the woods and sacrifices her to Satan for megastardom. Little do they know, she's not actually a virgin, so instead of dying, she becomes possessed by a demon and has to eat people in order to rejuvenate herself. And the sort of twist is that Amanda Seyfried is her friend / Moore, and ends up losing her boyfriend to Megan Fox's character, and then they have a final showdown. So it's really a monster hunter tale, but there's a lot more to unpack here. It's written by DIABLO CODY, as we said, most famous for writing Juno, an ex-exotic dancer. I think she's a very talented writer myself. And it's directed by another woman, Karyn Kusama, who is herself got some acclaim. She directed Girl Fight in 2000. She directed the Anne Flux film with Charlize Theron. She directed the divisive but well-directed Destroyer with Nicole Kidman in 2018. So they both have quite good track records. This movie has a really strong cult following, especially on platforms where people love memes like Tumblr. It's my wife told me it's definitely still alive for a lot of people. But otherwise, I think this is sort of like a time capsule of like early 2000s, or it's not even early, but it feels like early 2000s teen angst life. Like the soundtrack is all Panic at the Disco. There's posters for bands like Fall Out Boy and Story of the Year, I think, is in there. All sorts of references like that. But let's get right into it. Tad, you hadn't seen this movie. I think advertising tells us one story and the movie tells us another story. What was your expectation going in?
I expected this to suck donkey dong. And
well,
I was actually pleasantly surprised. For reference, this was kind of perfect timing because it's Halloween and my wife has never seen the Scream Queens TV show, which I am a big fan of. And I get the feeling that Ryan Murphy took some inspiration from this movie to kind of write the Chanel's characters, because it's the same kind of bitchy, over the top language, dirty mouth kind of teenage to college age girls. It felt great. And now that I know that Ryan Murphy's trying to write a season 3, I'm hoping he pulls in Amanda Seyfried, because she kind of is the archetype for what the like, especially in the last part of the movie. Like she fits that character type to a T.
Well, and you sort of bring up some interesting things. I do think this movie was influential. It was influential, but also really influenced by a lot of other things, including Diablo Cody's own work. I mean, it's sort of the school and the kids and the characters themselves are almost satirical of the characters in Juno. It's less grounded in reality, and the sort of caustic humor and is upped to a level where it's satirical as opposed to just sort of social commentary. But the cast is really quite impressive in this. You have Megan Fox, who actually gets to act for once. If anybody hasn't read or seen her recent interview where she talks about being sexualized at 15 by Michael Bay and other directors and casting people, read it, because it's kind of eye-opening, and it's actually pretty shitty how Hollywood treats young women. Let's all be surprised about that.
Yeah, I know, right?
But she gets to act. So does Amanda Seyfried. Megan Fox's character is named Jennifer, obviously, and Amanda Seyfried's called Needy. Her name is Anita, and she's sort of everyone kind of puts her in this box of being just the shadow to Jennifer's character. And we have Adam Brody playing Nikolai, the lead singer of the band that ends up, sacrificing Jennifer. He does a great job of being like the weird cross of Adam Lambert and
Billy Joe Armstrong.
Billy Joe Armstrong was, I feel like, really strong in
the nerdy goth kid.
Yeah, Kyle Gallner
from both characters.
But definitely, it's a 30 Seconds to Mars. It's very much that kind of thing. Every and this is just, but every 15-year-old scene kid would have had this band's album, in 2004. Like, they kind of nail the aesthetic and the song there. But he plays a really good bad guy. We also have a lot of side characters in here. J.K. Simmons plays the damaged teacher who has scars and is missing his left arm. Amy Sedaris plays Needy's mom, Amanda Seyfried's mom. It was so fun to see her in there. And speaking of Amy Sedaris, we have Chris Pratt, who has a little bit scene as Officer Cadet. That's kind of a douchebag. And I always wonder how people know each other in these movies and how they get involved, because I remember in an interview, Chris Pratt, of course, from Guardians of the Galaxy now and Parks and Rec and all sorts of things, Jurassic World series. One of his early crowning moments that he was super proud of as an actor is he left and went to New York, and then just ended up kind of bullying his way into doing, I think it was unpaid. I think it might have even been uncredited part in Strangers with Candy, which of course featured Amy Sedaris and Stephen Colbert and a lot of amazing people. And then to see these two characters in such small parts in sort of an indie icons film like Diablo Cody, it seems too unlikely to just be synchronicity. I think that's there's a story there, and I wish I knew it. And we also have Josh Emerson is in this. It's been a lot of stuff. Ryan Levine, Johnny Simmons, we talked about Scott Pilgrim the other day, or rather we will in a future episode. If you haven't heard it yet, you will. Played young Neil in Scott Pilgrim, so he's very recognizable as well. I do want to say that this episode in general, guys, there were some trigger warnings, some things like young women in peril, and also later Nazis. So we'll get into that. Greg, what was your expectation going into this film versus the reality of watching it?
I mean, I think it was a coin toss. I was ready to be really disappointed. I was ready to be blown away. I think I just kind of ended up disappointed. I knew that this was a cult classic. I knew it would be hopefully up my alley. But, you know, I didn't feel like the movie had any guts to it. It just kind of followed this rail that I could see coming and never went off of it. You know, maybe jumping ahead to spoilers, I did like that we saw a conclusion in the credits versus seeing it on screen. I thought that was kind of a nice touch because it ended on this kind of cliffhanger vibe, and I'm like, I don't care. And then, you know, I'm like, okay, I see the credits are like 4 minutes long. Let me jump around in those. I'm like, oh, okay, so it gets a little wrapped up in the credits. Great.
Yeah, and I think so. I agree with you on the aspect that you're not really surprised by the plot in this film, right? Like we get set up early on that Megan Fox's character, Jennifer, is kind of the mean girl. And Amanda Seyfried is, you know, the dorky one. You know, it's almost like she's taking over the lead part from Tina Fey's Mean Girls, right? Like she's the one that's sort of the dorky, like follow around, doesn't really understand. She's not fashionista, you know.
The doormat.
The doormat, right? Exactly. And she has this play. She has a boyfriend that she really loves, but she also is like clearly very connected to Jennifer, Megan Fox's character. And we can jump right in here. We'll get to you in a second, Mandy's just waiting in the wings. But there is very much sexual tension between the character of Jennifer and Needy, and that is set up early on. Personally, and that also is what I think sold this movie for a lot of, you know, the 15-year-old boys trying to get into the theater. I mean, I saw it in the theater, and it is very clear to me every time I watch this movie that women made this film. It doesn't mean it's not sexy. It doesn't mean there aren't, you know, scenes and that there are makeout scenes between Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried, which is a straight man in my 30s. It's, you know, perfect marketing. But everything isn't directed, I didn't feel, towards me as a man. If this film had been made by someone like a Michael Bay, we would have had every Transformer shot we had of Megan Fox, you know, like riding on a motorcycle, wearing shorts that, you know, essentially are flossing every part of her body, like ridiculous things that are just over the top garbage, in my opinion. And we don't get that. There's even things like Megan Fox at one point before she devours her first victim that we see. She unzips her like hoodie or sweater and she has nothing underneath. And it was impressive also on a high def TV to see for the first time that they hadn't heavily make up her chest. Like that's actual skin. And that's something that honestly, Michael Bay would have had that done. She'd have been sprayed down, like everything. It's not necessary. It's sort of ridiculous, but that would have happened if another person had been in charge. So I really hand it to the crew, Karyn Kusama, to have this film be a little more realistic. There's a lot of kids in the background who are actually kids, actors who look like they're in high school. I mean, it's shocking to see Amanda Seyfried look almost her real age. Like she always looks like a child, but she's little in this movie. Like we see everyone sort of in a more natural result. I mean, obviously Megan Fox is usually painted for the gods, right? But that's sort of also.
I guess for me, Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried in this, that like pulled me out. Like them trying to be like 15-year-old girls or 16, like however they were supposed to be. I'm like, no fucking way. No fucking way.
I mean, Megan
but-
Fox definitely looks out of place among everybody else in this film.
Oh yeah, well, which I mean, I was gonna say about to obsess over Megan Fox's skin in this movie, that kind of fits into the story of spoilers. She becomes a succubus, and when she's weakened, she talks about my hair's duller, I'm lifeless, etc. So when you see her about to feed, that's presumably when she's not at her most radiant, and then when we see her back in school again walking the halls, they have the glow behind her. She looks absolutely like perfect,
for sure. And I mean, she was 23 when this movie came out, so she is obviously older than the high school years, although that is actually so much closer than some. I mean,
yeah
I mean, Rachel McAdams is still playing a high schooler. So it's like, it happens. Amanda Seyfried, I tell you, the whole vibe of, even more so than Juno, the whole vibe of the wood paneled walls, the dark interior houses, the streets that are lined with just houses that you literally couldn't describe if you wanted to. They're just boring. It just screamed Midwest to me. I lived in Wisconsin for like 5 years. I was like, wow, this is, until later on when they reveal that there's a park there with an abandoned like municipal pool, which is redonkulous. It's a great scene, a great set, but it is redonkulous. It would never have been in this town, in my opinion. Except for that, I'm like, oh wow, this is the Midwest to me. And I think that, and my wife said, yeah, everything looks like it's 30 years old. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what the Midwest is like. Take now and then age it 30 years in the past, and that's what you got.
Someone did their research.
Well, yeah, unintentional research. Mandy, so I railed you out for quite a bit. What was your, you've seen the film. What was your expectation going in again? And was it bucked, changed?
Yeah, like I think the biggest, I don't know, like I remembered most of it. I remembered liking it, and I was excited that we we're going to watch it again. What I was most struck by this time around is how much I enjoyed the music. Like I really did, like you mentioned, that the soundtrack's really, really good, except for like the song that the band like sells Jennifer's soul for, which I thought was a great touch, because it's like, like this piece of crap.
Exactly.
Like,
it's such,
really wouldn't I thought that was nice that they did that, but they do play it a lot, and I was super annoyed at the song by the end, just like Amanda was. Like she's in the it's in her car and it comes on the radio and she's like, ah, and I was like, yeah, exactly, like we've heard this way too many times. I really like that there were two strong female leads, kind of frenemy style, finally in full opposition at the end. I actually almost texted you guys like a meme from this joke thing that I follow called The Man Who Has It All, and like their topic for today was films with a male lead, what do you think? And then like people riff on that, like, oh well, it must be like a romantic comedy, like if you do that, because they always like flip everything around. Like there just aren't that many movies with strong female leads, or that it's like about women, a story about women that's not about them being women. And I guess in this kind of was, but like they're friends, and like they had their own storyline, and I thought that was really refreshing, especially for a horror genre.
And something that I think is important to mention too, which is I think part of why it's so popular in like the Tumblr crowd and in a lot of online communities, is the LGBTQIA plus aspect. They're of course both beautiful women. They're beautiful actresses who are made to look beautiful on screen, but they're either bisexuality or homosexuality in this movie. It seems it is never. They didn't have to, I mean, this is going to be crass. Amanda Seyfried didn't have to get, finger banged in the parking lot by Megan Fox for us to know that this was here. Like it was not made for specifically the male gaze and ego, right? It's like they are two characters who clearly have a homosexual attraction to each other. And we learned that it's not a new attraction to each other, right? It plays out the whole film. It's always a subtext, which I mean, it would always be a subtext. And no one who's obsessed with another person would have been like, today I'm not going to feel that.
To that end, I will say one thing that got bucked is I very clearly remember that tagline, like in theaters, when Megan Fox says like "I go both ways" or whatever the bisexual line is. And when I saw it, I was like, that's a little better than the trailers put it. It came off as, it's funny, it's cheeky, but it came off like a genuine line. Like she meant it. It wasn't just written in to have her say that. Like she actually was, and that was kind of her way of saying it in character to her friend, in the context of she's a succubus and they're in the middle of a fight to the death and all this crazy going on.
It wasn't and I think that's I think that's what I mean is I think a lot of people see this movie and are like, finally, like two characters who have an attraction to a same-sex partner or person, and they're not just flat, right? I think because we get this, it's very clear from the beginning and all throughout the film, all the way to the end, that Megan Fox, Jennifer, is the mean girl character. She takes advantage in many ways of Amanda Seyfried's character. Needy is definitely the little dog on the totem pole, but to mix my metaphors. But I think especially with the end where let's listen to this end here, right? Amanda Seyfried has just run from the prom in this hideous, worst on the runway, RuPaul's Drag Race, pink, shiny prom dress to this abandoned pool where Chip, her boyfriend, has just been bitten and is bleeding into the pool, and Jennifer is trying to eat her. Amanda Seyfried knocks her out of the way, trying to get Chip out of the pool. This is where we're at. And Jennifer has now levitated out of the pool near them.
She can fly. She's just hovering. It's not that impressive. But you have to undermine everything that I do. You are such a player hater. You're a jerk.
Wow, nice insult, Hannah Montana. You got any more harsh digs?
You know what? You were never a good friend. Even when we were little, you used to steal my toys and pour lemonade on my bed.
And now I'm eating your boyfriend. See? At least I'm consistent.
So we get this, it's like, it seems, when I was watching it again, I was like, that's a little on the nose. But then as I let it sink in, I'm like, actually, I think it's sort of a misdirect on Jennifer's character, right? Because the reality is why do you always want what I want? It's like, well, because she kind of wants her, right? Like, I think that there is this strong sexual desire, because it's why Jennifer keeps going back to Needy's character and kind of berating her, right? Just like a sort of a verbally abusive boyfriend would be doing,
she doesn't let her show off her body when they go out together.
Right.
Right? It's like very controlling.
And it's the same thing with Chip, right? Her Needy's boyfriend, right? Why does it have to be him? You could have anyone. And it's like, because he's my barrier to you. You're my thing. And it's not a healthy relationship. It's no relationship I would want. But I think that it's really interesting that's the internal desire that's driving Jennifer. Yes, I'm teaching a creative writing class right now, so all of this, all these terms are rolling around my brain. But it's true. The external desire is that she's like, well, I'm just a bitch and I get what I want and I want what you have. The actual drive, right, is that she's like, if you have other alternatives, I am too insecure to believe that you will have me. So, and that comes out. It just is never said directly because it doesn't have to be said directly. At least that's the hope on the part of, I think, Diablo, Cody, and the director. And so I really liked that scene. Also, we get some of the great sass. Like Diablo Cody is sort of like the Gilmore Girls, but dirty, right? Like she has these ridiculous lines, and some of them ring really true to what we would say in high school and stuff, while others are too on the nose, but sometimes they're funny, so we let it go. There's another clip here that I'll play just because we're here. This is in the very beginning, before they go to the bar that burns down and starts the whole thing. Needy is with Chip, and Jennifer comes to pick her up, and this happens.
Let's go to the club.
Holiday Lane is not a club, it's a bar. In fact, it's not even a bar, it's like a bingo hall with taps.
Eat my ass, Chip. You're just jello because you're not invited.
I'm not Jello? That place is disgusting. Everyone in there has a mustache.
You're totally Jello. You're lime green Jello, and you can't even admit it to yourself.
Your lime green Jello will never not be something I don't say. That line is so insane that I'm like, yep, that's something I would have said. In fact, I probably would have said it to Tad or Jeff. It just would have happened.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't been in the vernacular sooner. And I was amazed at how quotable this movie is. This movie has now some of my favorite lines. By the way, Nate, get with the times. The proper term is finger blast. Thank you very much. and also, that clip highlighted that my favorite line in the movie is when she's hovering. She's like, she's just hovering. It's not that impressive. I'm like, that just nailed home just how ridiculous this movie is.
Yeah, it's like every time it gets super weird and supernatural,
they're just like
with Siegfried, she's like no, she brings it down to earth again, and it's cool because it makes Jennifer a character instead of just a monster. Because there are some, I mean, I'm inured to most horror things at this point, but there are some spooky parts, right? The parts where Jennifer feeds and sort of she can't just eat a man, she has to make them afraid and hopeless. So
the special effects were good too.
They were
really good.
Loved her barf.
Her barf, yeah, she has this black, exorcist barf that then like riles up a little bit, like it's got these spikes like audio waves.
I thought it was the symbiote.
It looks like the Venom symbiote, totally.
Yeah.
Also, there's neat little touches that we don't really, they're never explained, but I kind of found them welcome because it just showed that craftsmanship aspect that we get in a film that's well produced and also kind of well loved. Like animals and insects show up when Jennifer's about to feed, right? When she's about to go, animalistic, demonic, and have teeth and rip someone open and eat them. Deer show up, animals show up, biting mosquitoes show up. They start to gather, and it's bizarre, but it's kind of hilarious. And it's never really acknowledged, but it's consistent, which I kind of like. And so I'm totally down with it. Anytime you throw something new at me that, even if you're not going to tell me what it's about, at least make it fun to watch. It's sort of the Robert Rodriguez's, anthem, and I think it works. Something I want to go back because Mandy, you mentioned the song that the fake band is called Low Shoulder, like a gravel shoulder on a road, which is the most. You know what it made me think? You weren't with us, Tad, but our friend Greg Kelly, friend of the pod, who is our most punk friend of all time. He was like, "Hey, the band Goldfinger is playing a show at the State Theater in Portland, Maine. Do you want to go with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And that was like the first time I remember going to like a pretty decent punk show. And we go, and Alistair, which is another fun little punk band, I think they maybe just dropped their first album, but they were opening. And the lead singer, if you're out there, we love you, has the highest voice I have ever heard on stage. And it was like that. Like it was exactly like that, that show that they go to in this. And it's sort of that band vibe. Like they're a little too Maroon 5 to be punk. Not you, Alistair, the rest of the band, but they're a little too like mainstream. And the song that this fake band sings, it's essentially like a 2014-year-old's Candle in the Wind. Like it's just so sappy and ridiculous. And we'll get into sappy and ridiculous when we get into Hard Rock Zombies as well. But it just plays so perfect that every time it comes on, like you said, Mandy, it is probably played a little too much for my liking. It's even before it becomes sort of ironic or sort of hated. It's like I hear it too many times. But it made me think then of being in high school and saying a band is just not very good, or they're crap, or they're posers and whatever, and having somebody like in the front of the class turn around and like try and rip your head off. There's a scene where Amanda Seyfried is in class. J.K. Simmons, the teacher, is up front, and he's like, the band, who are heroes for saving people from the fire, which is of course bullshit, are dedicating their time to come play this song, are dedicating this song to the town. And of course it's that song. And Amanda Seyfried's like, they're losers. They didn't do that. They're bullshit. And somebody in the front turns around. She's got a t-shirt on with like Low Shoulder. And she's like, they're heroes. And just her delivery on that, I was like, oh my God, I'm having flashbacks to so many conversations in high school where I was like, why did I even open my mouth? I don't care. Your music taste is terrible and I don't care. And it was just, that was the most real moment in the entire film to me. Not the emotional stuff, not anything. That moment where somebody in the front row who's wearing, you know, a Scene Kid like rubber band around their wrist and a t-shirt with their favorite band on it turns around and tries to read me for Phil. That triggered me. I don't know if anybody else felt that way. The other thing in this movie that is worth touching on is, I think, Greg, you mentioned it, sort of there's this whole like after story, right? Because at the end of the movie, spoiler alerts, these are all spoiler alerts. I still think it's worth watching, but Amanda Seyfried has killed Jennifer, and then she goes to a crazy asylum, essentially, for, we presume, everybody thinks that she's the crazy cannibal killer who's been killing and eating people, because she was caught in the act of killing Jennifer. And she is in the nut house, and she's really aggressive. And you find out at the end, because she's been telling you this story in in a flashback, essentially, that after being bit by demonic Jennifer, she has sort of gleaned some of the demon's power. So she breaks free of the asylum. Why she waited this long, I don't know. It's a convenient device. But she hops in a car, hitchhiking then to Madison, Wisconsin, I assume, to see this band play. And the driver is Lance Henriksen from Aliens, from Millennium, from all sorts of things, a famous horror icon. And in just this weird little bit part. And then she goes and kills the band in the credits. It's mostly still shots, but we just see the band like rocking out, being stupid idiot band people like any of us would if we were given a shit ton of money and let loose in a hotel. And then it's just them like murdered in the apartment with body bags thrown over them. And it is kind of gratifying because the band are terrible people. And they're also given little character traits, right? Like we see way more of them than you would normally see from like the bad guy. They're kind of charming in a disturbing way. Like especially when they argue whether or not, when they're at the bar trying to decide if Jennifer, who's coming on to the lead singer, is a virgin or not. And I love that Nikolai, the lead singer, is so convinced. He's like, I know these towns. She's definitely a virgin. And he's completely wrong. She's absolutely not a virgin, apparently, in any way, shape, or form. And I love that aspect. Like he's so out of touch. They're so wrong. And they get their comeuppance, but it's later. You know, it's that old classic devil's deal, right? Like the devil gives you the thing, but it's really short-lived. It was his plan all along. And I don't know. Yeah, Tad?
Speaking of music, it's because I'm always going to bring it up. I absolutely did not expect The Sword song to be in the middle.
Me either. The Celestial, I think it is. Is that what it was?
It was Celestial Crown, and I fucking love The Sword, and I was so happy to hear a Sword song in a movie, but at the same time, I'm like, this song doesn't fit at all. Like, what the?
For anyone who doesn't know The Sword, they are a sort of a psychedelic, a rock band that does sort of a cosmic vibe, sort of like stoner rock, but on a whole elevated level. Yeah, it's really fantastic. They've got several albums out. They also have incredible 70s and 80s style album artwork. Just check them out. The Sword. But yeah, that one definitely stood out. It worked great in the film, but it felt more like an orchestral part of the soundtrack because it was not in the same genre as, you know, Panic at the Disco and the other. And so
jarring. Especially because it's like she's swimming in a lake. I'm like, what does this song have to? I don't know.
I think, who else do we have in there? We have the lead singer of Paramore, Haley Atwell, has a song in here as well. This is an interesting soundtrack. If you like mid to late 2000 sort of emo post-modern punk, not post-punk, but post-modern punk, then you'll probably dig the soundtrack. If you're a 2000s kid, you will definitely like it. The music, and again, that's why I chose this film to go with Hard Rock Zombies, it is ever present. And it was also very loud. They definitely made some choices about the mixing. I don't know if anybody else, like when Jennifer is going to go on a feeding, spree somewhere, we know because the music blows out the speakers. as opposed to the dialogue. And it was an interesting choice. I remember in the theater, it works really well. In my home theater, it was not so great, except to scare the crap out of my cats. But again, I liked this. Greg, you had some reservations. As you said, I think, was it that the plot didn't diverge from the expected? It kind of is what I expected.
I think it was that it went, I said it went down a track and didn't jump off. And I mean, yeah, plot aside, I think it went down a middle of the road track. And maybe that's my issue is, like you said, it was very cleverly marketed at 15-year-old boys.
Yes.
But it wasn't a movie for them. But on the flip side, I don't think it was this like powerful female film either necessarily. Like, I think though, Mandy, I think you had it exactly right that, I mean, how many movies are there where there's two strong female leads who talk about something that isn't men for more than 5 minutes? So it had some stuff going for it, but I wanted it to be one way or the other, and it tried to do both. And I think it
tries to be mainstream.
Yeah.
Right? It tries to be mainstream. And I think it succeeds in a lot of ways. I think it's a lot more successful than a lot of the films that we would kind of compare it to, while still retaining more of a female touch, if you will allow me that. I think this film really shines in when you dig in past it, right? Because, for example, we have in the beginning this scene where they're at the bar before Jennifer approaches the lead singer and tries to sort of schmooze him really awkwardly. Like, I think Megan Fox killed this acting role. I think she deserves so much more credit because she's not allowed to act very often because she's so pretty. She's not given the opportunity. And in this film, she actually acts, and it's startling to see it because when she goes from like, I'm the queen of the school, I can do whatever, I'm above all of you people, to talking to an older guy that she thinks is hot, it's embarrassing, right? Like, she's stumbling a little bit, like it's sort of, and I felt the nuance from her that I didn't expect when I first saw this movie, and I was so happy it was there because, again, her next biggest role is probably Transformers, the first couple, and she's not given anything in that. She's just arm candy in that film, and it's a shame.
Didn't need to be in that movie at all.
No, she didn't. And in fact, they proved it when she got in a fight with Michael Bay and they recast her as somebody else, so, and it's not her fault, right? But I really liked that scene. And in this, right before they approach it, she turns to Needy's character and is like, what are you so afraid of? They're just boys. We have all the power. And she grabs her breasts and is like, just point these where you want it, smart bombs where you want to go. And the interesting thing is that's how she acts. But then we see the reality, right? She has no power against these people. They use her in a terrible way, and she's essentially murdered and possessed by a demon because of it. Like, it's the most extreme version of this. And then she spends the rest of the movie forcing power over men. And it's sort of in that way, Jeff would probably mention, it's like a revenge flick, right? Like, that's sort of part of Jennifer's character, is that she's been abused and now she's living the fantasy that she told herself was real in the beginning, which is, we have the power, because she doesn't have the power as a woman in our society. And that's, people are like, oh, it's digging too deep. Well, it's what I fucking do.
I think that's valid, but it's also it's the same problem I think I had with Prevenge, where it's basically, it's a revenge flick, except it's a revenge against people who basically had nothing to do with your pain and suffering. Yeah. So it's it kind of invalidates it. It makes you seem like a jackass.
Well, so it's one of those things. It's like, it's sort of, I think contemporarily we need to look, right? Like, does it invalidate it? Because that's a big point of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Is somebody damaging, I'm not saying black people are doing this at all, it's all likelihood, it's white idiots out there, but damaging a Target during a protest, well, that Target didn't oppress them, sure, but how else are you going to be seen? How else are you going to be heard? And are we, by not forcibly changing it at all times, complicit in that oppression, right? It's sort of like, does it even matter at any given point? Like, if during the slave uprisings, in pre-Civil War America, am I going to hold it against a group of, generationally, oppressed and enslaved people who kill a household of slave owners, including the children? Am I going to hold it against them? Probably not. So it's kind of like you said, does your damage make you hurting other more, relatively innocent people okay? I don't know. That's an argument to have, and maybe it's a sense of scale versus an overarching sentiment. But it's true. It's uncomfortable because you feel for these people, right? Because she's actively preying on people. She's not going for the strong guy who's a douchebag. She's going for the linesman,
the exchange student,
the linesman, the nerdy kid, right? She's going for sort of the low-hanging fruit, much like so many of those asshole men we knew in high school did, right? Like, she's becoming that monster. It is that flip. And I think it's really easy to see it as the monster, but I think it takes that extra step to take it. I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. It's a flip of the script. And yes, it's terrible in both instances, but now I kind of get it. So I think that's interesting. The other thing that I thought is worth talking about in this, and I think there was some talk about this component of the film when it came out, that some people were upset about, is the weird parallels to school shootings. Lots of scenes in this, because essentially there's this terrible tragedy in this small town. 8 students are killed in the fire, which, by the way, let's talk about why 8 high school students are in a 21 and over bar at that point. I'm like, maybe your town needs some fucking work.
Midwest, that's why.
Right, it is exactly the Midwest. Literally, when I lived in Wisconsin, the school bus would stop at several bars along the way to drop the kids off, because that's where their parents would pick them up. So there's these things where in the beginning, everyone is crying in the hallways. I'm assuming that there are like counselors on site, that sort of thing. Like people, like the J.K. Simmons teacher gives a really like heartfelt speech that sort of falls on deaf ears, but everyone is really upset. And then everyone's upset when the star football player is killed. And then Amanda Seyfried's character starts to say, and then people are getting less upset. The more people that get killed, the more immune they become to the pain, and they just start going about their business. There's no more candlelit vigils singing that obnoxious song. And the parallel, this is post-Columbine. This is not, school shootings are not new to Diablo Cody and this film. They're well aware of that. And that sort of extra layer that they put on that isn't really relevant to the plot so much as, it's convenient for the plot because maybe then people aren't looking for the killer as much. But the idea that the more violence occurs, the more we just say, what about today though? That was yesterday, is really terrible. And it actually upset me. And it made me think way more than I expected to about it in the aftermath, because we see this over and over and over again. Every school shooting happens and people are outraged, and less people seem to report on it and give a shit. And I think that this movie is well aware of it.
It's a well-known psychological phenomenon, and you can see it happen over the past 70, 80 years of media. At some point, these things become so common that people get numb to it because you kind of have to. You don't have
Well, South Park has played that so well when their entire arc in the school shooting, it's like every day, it's like, yep, that's going to happen. Send them back to school. And I think this film has that as an element to it. It uses it, it uses the murdering demoness, a succubus character, to sort of add that extra layer. And I don't think it was shoehorned in. I think that it's just subtle enough to not overwhelm the larger, more mainstream plot, but it's definitely present. And I remember it in the theater, and watching it, I remember it again. And I'm like, this touched some nerves when it came out. So interesting. Again, I think Amanda Seyfried's performance was also really great. She's essentially the main character of this film. She narrates it. We get a lot of, I think in the beginning, my wife watched it with me and she didn't really like the narration aspect. I agree, you have to settle into it, but I think that the intent was probably to mimic all of these high school, movies where it's like, okay, I know, I'm just blah, 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 Mr. Normal, or Miss Normal in the average American high school. And then I became a princess. It's that sort of thing. and they're putting it in this completely inappropriate film. And I think that was the intent, and it didn't bother me. I kind of liked it.
They used it in Mean Girls too, right?
Yeah, which of course Amanda Seyfried is in that as well. She makes out with her cousin.
Mm-hmm. And she looks younger in this film than she did in Mean Girls, but it was like 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that disturbing? Here's the thing. It's crazy. Here's the thing. It's because she is fairly young in this film, right? As is Megan Fox. And here's the crazy part to me is that we so often forget how young these actresses are in films paired with 50-year-old men. And it is kind of upsetting because, you know, when someone is dolled up with a lot of makeup and they spend a lot of time and money to dress them up, it's like, oh yeah, whoever. I mean, even Keira Knightley and Johnny Depp, you know what I mean? You're like, yeah, whatever. They're both like attractive. And then you're like, oh yeah, they're attractive. And this is her grandfather, right? Like, it is just like Richard Gere having sex with Rachel McAdams. That's not a good, you know, balance. Them telling Maggie Gyllenhaal that she's, you know, too old to play opposite Richard Gere when she's 33. And she's like, he's old enough to be like my old dad, right? That's craziness. And I felt like this film made me think about it because Amanda Seyfried looks like a high school student to me. But I do think Trixie Mattel, awesome drag queen, great in her and Katya's show, which if you don't know what that is, it's just watch it. It's on YouTube. It is amazing. But they were talking, and also We Like to Watch is another show they do for Netflix shows. And I think in one of those, someone is supposed to be like the ugly duckling at a high school. And they're like, yeah, she's really ugly. And they like put their hand to their face and they're like, it's like, oh, I'm so ugly. Like, that's what it's like. Like, no one is really going to look at Amanda Seyfried and be like, cow, hideous, beast. Like, not going to happen.
This is why she'd be great Chanel.
Huh?
That's why she makes such a great Chanel. Listen up, sluts.
Right. Yeah. So, anyway, we're going to move on with this because I've been prattling on a ton. Greg, final thoughts on this. Would you recommend it? Why and to who?
I wouldn't. I'm going to do my usual stick of alternate recommendations. Consider watching The Craft or either version of All Cheerleaders Die. So those are my options for you.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's valid.
Witchcraft, revenge flicks about high schools that have all female like leads. So,
and I sort of think it's interesting. We talked about this a little bit before the show, but this film does feel like sort of the plot of The Craft lifted and put in someone else's hands and molded into another movie. So I think if you like The Craft, I think you might like Jennifer's Body. It definitely has more of a Diablo Cody feel. So if you like Juno and that weird fucking shtick that they have going, like I do, with Michael Cera for president, then you'll like Jennifer's Body a lot. But okay, those are valid. Mandy, who would you recommend Jennifer's Body to and why?
All right. Well, I want to mention also that a plot point that we didn't get to, which is I really enjoyed the blood bond between the two girls.
Right.
And how that played out in the film. That was really good. So I would recommend this to people who like witty one-liners, as we mentioned, very quotable film, lots of zingers, good stuff. If you, I don't know, enjoy picking apart toxic relationships, this has great examples of gaslighting in it. So
Totally.
Check that out. And then also, you know, murdery demons, of course, right?
Absolutely. I'm a sucker for cannibal films.
Right?
So.
Can't go wrong with this one. And it was great. I thought there was just like a lot of little weird idiosyncrasies, like we mentioned through it with the animals, and like the girls' subtle kind of relationship and friendship dynamic and stuff. So it's a good one.
And that brings a good point. And the blood bond you mentioned as well, all these things. There's lots of, the script is clever. Diablo Cody is a clever writer. And so like the town is called Devil's Kettle because there's this little waterfall and it goes to a hole in the ground where it all drains and so on. And scientists haven't been able to figure out where the hell it exits. And that's where the killer from the band throws the knife. And then at the end, when Amanda Seyfried is hitchhiking, she sees there's the outlet on the side of the highway, wherever she is, and there's the knife, and she picks the knife, and that's what she uses to kill the band. So it's like and they don't even have to, there's literally no dialogue about it. it's just visual. And that's a testament to both her writing and also, I think, Kusama's directing. Kusama's directing.
We call that good storytelling.
Good storytelling. All right. I'm going to say, I'm going to do me, because it's my show, so I get to go before Tad. I recommend this film to people who like some sort of caustic humor with their horror. I agree with Greg. This is not like hugely for like gore hounds or people who like really terrifying horror. It's more like a fun film you could watch with people who want to watch something scary for Halloween and you also want to have a good time. There's some people who are jumpy or good. There's some jump moments. There's some great effects. There's some beautiful women. There's not that many beautiful men in this film, which is sort of interesting. And I think that that's also valid. There's a lot of normal looking men in this film. If you want to see J.K. Simmons play a heavier set character with insanely bad hair and one arm, there's nowhere else to look. Do it. Yeah, so I'll recommend it to people for that. And also, I will say people who like The Craft. And I'm not going to weigh in on whether or not the new Craft film is going to be good or bad. I haven't seen it. I don't know. Let's be honest, none of us know. But I will probably enjoy this one more. It's more up my alley. So if you agree with me on these podcasts, give it a watch. Tad, who would you recommend Jennifer's Body to and why?
Surprisingly, I can't believe that I actually ended up liking this movie more than I did. And I think it's just because I distinctly remember this movie's release and hype. And I was like, why do I care? But I agree with you. If you like bitchy teen sort of drama, if you like this movie is fantastic on the dialogue. The last 30 minutes are the best part of the movie by far. Like the movie starts out really slow and then just that whole like last 30 minutes of the movie makes everything. So it's worth the build up. So I would recommend it to people who, like I had mentioned before, if you like TV shows like Scream Queens, if you like Mean Girls and you like a little horror mixed in with that stuff. Oh wait, there's already horror mixed up in just what I actually would recommend this. I can't believe I'm saying that.
It's true. And again, I'll just say one more time, I think it's a marketing thing, right? Because they marketed this hardcore as, look at Megan Fox be sexy. And she is sexy. But let's be real. This isn't a movie about her being sexy. This is more a movie about the effects of someone being sexy and being assaulted and turned into a demon. So that is it for this one, but we've got another film coming up. Next up is 1985's Hard Rock Zombies. So this film is a film that Tad and I watched about 15 years ago.
Tad, when we watched those 15 years ago, was it a copy from Video Update where you worked? Is that it? Or did our friend Matt somehow get a copy from near his house?
No, it was definitely a copy from work because I distinctly remember we talked about this in a previous episode. I just can't remember which one. This was a movie that I'd worked there for a few years, and I looked at this cover and I was like, Hard Rock Zombies, guys, we should probably watch this. And then I don't even remember the details of how we ended up watching it.
I don't know either. And here's the other thing. So usually, and Video Update is long gone, RIP, movies that you took from Video Update did not often make it back to Video Update. So what shocks me is that if you did this, that one of us doesn't own it. And that's why I asked, because none of us have it. And
I can assure you that this movie was rented because there's no way I would actually want to keep this piece of shit in my library.
I very much would. We'll talk about this. By the way, those who already love cult cinema and are fairly well versed will know that this movie from 1985, Hard Rock Zombies, is often paired with 1988's Black Roses, which is a different film, but another one to watch if you love this sort of like demonic black magic mixed with 80s rock and roll. So I'm gonna summarize this film quick because before this. Tad and I had seen it, but Mandy and Greg, you guys had not seen this film, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I didn't need to ask that question. So this movie...
I've seen a lot of really random old zombie movies, though. So.
That's right. Mandy is our resident zombie lover. I'm a big zombie fan myself. And this movie, it's rated R from 1985. And it's directed and written by Krishna Shah. And also as a writer is David Allen Ball. And let's just... there is so much crammed into this insane film that I'm just going to give you the actual plot that is interspersed throughout insane segments that are called like skits. So the overall plot is that there's this 80s rock band. They're a rock band. They look like they're supposed to be a metal band, and they have like 1 or 2 metal songs, but really they mostly play like
80s
like
pop.
Yeah, like it's sort of a weird like soft.
Ballads.
Yeah, it's a ballady. Like it's not as like 80s hair metal as like Every Rose Has Its Thorn. It's more like some weird mix between like Winger and another band I can't quite put my finger on. It's just soft, right? It's mostly soft, very non-threatening, even though they pretend it's threatening. The plot is this band is on their way to do a show in some podunk town where their manager, who is also their straight-laced friend who just always has like a cigarette or a cigarillo in his mouth, like it's a stogie, but I don't think it's ever lit.
Shout out to him for his lack of recognizing a good gig.
Yeah, so great, hilarious. So he's like, we're going to, like, there's a guy from, I want to say, is it Paramount or something? It's a big record, like an actual record and a media producer, something like that. He's like, he's going to be at this show, so we have to blow him away. And they're trying to get there. But this little girl at their previous show the night before says to the lead singer, don't go, you can't go. My dad will stop you. And then she leaves. And he's like, weird kid. And they go anyway. And sure enough, the town is anti-rock and roll and forces them to not do the show. Also, they pick up a hitchhiker who's a hot chick who says, why don't you guys stay at my family's house because it's better than a hotel, which seems unlikely. The family is actually like the relatives of the still living Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, who made a deal with the devil of some kind, and now they have mutated children and are monsters. They kill the band. Don't know why. I guess it's just what they do. Try to recruit the manager to help Adolf cleanse the world, I guess, as Adolf wants to do. And yeah, right, the Fourth Reich. And then the little girl who, by the way, the lead singer, who's apparently our protagonist, has decided he wants to have sex with because he's in love with her and she is a child, and he writes a song about it.
Uncomfortable.
Right? And that's the big romance of the movie. He says, here, play this song, which he has on a cassette, if something happens to me. This song is something he got from a book. That's literally the only explanation in this, but it is a like lick that raises the dead, which him and his band, him and his band are only moderately interested in that fact. They learn that it's true, and it's just something that, oh, that's interesting. Like, you know, like, oh, they put walnuts in this trail mix. Like, that's fascinating.
I think that this
raises
movie,
the dead.
It's just live action Metalocalypse, right?
It is totally, that is so, except for not having Brendan Small in it, which would make it a million times better. So yes, so anyway, something bad does happen to him. She plays the riff. They raise from the dead, go kill the Nazi family, and then go play their gig. The only problem is that the Nazi family are all ghouls, so they come back from the dead because you can't kill them. They then go on a rampage throughout the town, killing the townspeople who then become ghouls themselves. And we have this insane, if you're not following this, well, welcome to the plot. We have this insane thing where you've got like the townspeople who we never had met before this really, trying to escape and stop these ghouls from ripping people's heads off, which seems to be their favorite thing. And then you have the band, who are basically like tin marching men. Like they move with like a weird dance rhythm as zombies. They're sort of like Rhythm Nation, but if you like held the rewind button, so it's real slow. And they play their gig and then go back to their graves. And the only way the manager can get them out again is by saying, hey, the townspeople are going to sacrifice that underage girl you want to have sex with to the ghouls unless you come help. And then they do come help. And all the ghouls in the band die in Hitler's gas chamber. Yeah, this is literally the fucking movie.
Under the mountain underground gas chamber.
Totally. It's that.
Super weird.
Also, there's like a Methuselah Moses figure at one point. And there's
God's trying to take him away.
Oh God. And what else? There's these tons of weird jokey moments in here where they try and do humor. There's 2 times that I actually laughed in this film. I will give it that. I was surprised. But it's an hour and 36 minutes, which feels like 45 minutes too long. Yeah, it feels like a long time. So I've given you all I can give you on this film. I can't really, there's some background we'll get into, but Tad, you were really passionate about this film. Take it away. What is your experience rewatching this film?
Okay. I think you and I can agree that this movie was better the second time around when we're older and we can like dig into it a little bit deeper. But fuck, this is a movie that had so much potential because there were a lot of great ideas in this movie, and some of them were, I think, accidentally well executed, and some of them were extremely poorly executed. So my summation before I start going mental on this is a movie that Full Moon should have done and did not do, considering that this movie came out a year before Terror Vision came out. This movie feels, and I don't know if it's on purpose or not, I have no idea, because it looks like it was made with $5, which was $5 more than we had for our budgets when we were making movies. But this movie did, you know, there's clearly parallels with this movie and the stuff we did when we were in high school and beyond. I want Full Moon to remake this movie. Legit. I want them to put some money behind this and actually execute some of the good ideas that are in this movie. There is a fucking bit that goes on for the entire movie about one of the sons of Hitler or whatever it is, ghouls, that eats itself slowly through the entire movie with there's no reason for this to be in there. But throughout the entire movie, this thing is literally just cutting pieces of itself off and eating it. And and the end of the movie, it eats its own face off. And I distinctly was like, oh my God, this is the movie. Because for years I've been like, you know what? I distinctly remember a scene where a zombie ate itself throughout the entire movie. And I'm like, what fucking movie was that from? Now I know. It's from Hard Rock fucking Zombies.
Yeah, that was literally the only thing that I remembered from this movie at the time, although some other things came back to me.
It was really funny. He gets mustard out at one point.
Yeah,
he does.
On his hand, and then he eats the hand. And there's this weird music playing in the background that's like always the same when you switch back, sort of.
So the characters we're talking about for our listeners, they're 2 little people, and they've been in other films, but they are, I think Olaf and Bucky are their names. I think Gary Friedkin played Bucky. I could be wrong. A lot of these people are not in many other films. But yeah, one of the little people has an eye patch, and the other little person has is like a demon mask, like he's a monster. They are the children of Hitler and Eva Braun's children. And I don't exactly know, there are 3 other characters in the family. I don't know which ones, if they're all just supposed to be brother, sister, offsprings of Hitler. It's unclear. Because 2 of the characters are like a couple, a woman who seduces people and the other man who takes photos of them as she kills them. And then there's a leather-facey wannabe guy. He doesn't wear a mask. He's just a big bald guy. But he tries to either axe or weed whacker people to death. And then you have And then you have the 2 little people. And at one point, one of the more disturbing scenes, before we know that the old man of the family is actually Hitler, he's like getting ready to have sex in bed with Eva Braun, and then the 2 little people pop up. And he's like, what are you doing here? You have to go. And they're like, oh, can't we watch? And then he's like, no, get out. And then Eva Braun's like, why can't they watch? And he's like, okay. Like, and you're just like, ooh, extra gross. Super gross.
There's so much shit in this movie where it's like, this would be funny if it was competently done. This movie is...
This would be funny if I was 100% sure that everyone in this movie knew that they were in a movie. That would be funny. So here's the thing. And also, we don't know, there's no real explanation, except for the fact that they made a deal with the devil somehow. They made a deal first with the American government to leave Germany and come live in this podunk town as ex-Bible salesmen. And then they made a deal apparently with the devil to be ghouls. And there are some fun gore effects in here, very 80s low budget gore effects. Their heads being pulled off all the time, hands being cut off, reanimated hands. I don't think any actual tarantulas were harmed in the filming of this. It looks like it may be, though, and I always hate that, because the reason I don't think so, because there are two different tarantulas and two different things are the budget. There's not a huge amount of budget. I have a feeling that $10 for a tarantula might be a little steep and they needed to return it.
Yeah.
Which is always good. And let's talk quick about, so Krishna Shah is the director of this film. And as an adult, this kind of makes more sense. From India, Shah was born in Bombay and died in Mumbai in 2013. Now, he did Broadway stuff, and he did another film, a couple of films, but the bigger one is American Drive-In from 1985 as well, which he also co-wrote with Alan Ball. Now, if you know Bollywood cinema at all, or Bollywood or Indian daytime dramas, you know that they love their insane cuts. They love odd dancing at weird occasions, and they like what I like to call mood shots, which is occasionally during scenes, they'll cut to somebody doing something, like another character. They couldn't possibly technically be at the same time, but it's just to set the mood. And in this case, it's Hitler's granddaughter, played by Lisa Toothman, we'll get into, dancing like in the street in like torn jeans and stuff, like very 80s. And it's just to set the mood. And they do this in a lot of Bollywood cinema and TV dramas and things. By the way, if you want to see some insane shit, go look at compilations of reaction shots from Indian soap operas, because it will blow your mind. They discovered the Photoshop filter button and After Effects button and the zoom buttons, and they wear them out. Yes. It is crazy. But that made more sense to me, knowing that someone who is familiar with Indian cinema made this movie, because it makes all of the jumping back and forth, especially in the second half of the film, which is less, it's less prosaically lined out. It made it more sensical to me. I wasn't as shocked that I was seeing things that just seemed like scenes crammed in that had nothing to do with anything.
It's just, there's so much going on in the movie that the pacing is, that's why I was like, this movie feels like it's 3 hours long, because even though it's a 90-minute movie, this is shorter than Jennifer's Body, but
it sure doesn't feel like it.
The pacing doesn't exist. And the thing is like I said, there's a lot of positive in this movie that just isn't realized. Like, some of the acting is actually pretty hilarious. Like, most of the band members before they die are pretty charismatic and actually fun to listen to, because it sounds like they're just kind of ad-libbing. And the townspeople are it feels like an episode of Parks and Rec before Parks and Rec was a thing, where they're just throwing out weird shit. It's like, who wrote this? What moron wrote this law? You did. No, it was him. Hey, I just advised you. It doesn't even feel scripted. But like I said, this movie, what I really give this movie a detriment for is it's ugly, as in like it was filmed with the cheapest shit possible. Sure. For 85, it's unbelievably ugly.
Yeah, Fujifilm, and I don't know if this was shot on video or not. No, in fact, I know it wasn't, because on the title card, it says Fuji Color underneath it, which I guarantee Fuji did not ask them to put on that title card. I will say there's a lot of stuff to get into with cast and interesting things too, but we'll just move this. Mandy, what did you expect going in, and how were those expectations met or obliterated?
I was expecting more actual zombies and less like demon ghouls. I was very pleasantly surprised by like the nod to like Hitler and like Nazi lore as part of a lot of zombie films, like through history. It wasn't exactly along the same lines as is often included, but I really liked that was like part of the package that we got in Hard Rock Zombies.
This is the second movie that we've reviewed that has a Hitler character in it.
Yeah,
it does. Go watch our Ultimate Fight and Undefeatable with Cynthia Rothrock episode. That's a good. I think it's episode 3. That was a good one. Here's the other thing to note too.
But there is a strong history of Hitler and Nazis specifically in zombie films, and I like that it got wrapped into this.
And it's become part of lore. It's also based on fact, but it's become part of popular lore that the Nazis, especially during the end, and this trails back to Hellboy as well, tried to explore occult things to win the war. And that's what happens. I'm pretty sure the Trump presidency is trying the same thing right now. And when you get desperate, things get weird. And this is definitely an aspect of it in this movie. The other thing to mention is, for those of us who watch a lot of 80s movies, and a lot of 80s movies love their hair metal or new wave or various things, and they have a lot of footage of bands playing. We did Vicious Kiss a while back. They did the same thing. These people actually play their instruments, it looks like, which is kind of fascinating. I'm sure there's a few exceptions. The lead character, Jesse, who falls in love with the underage girl, he is played by E.J. Curse, which is actually, his birth name is Ernie Corshio. And he's been in a lot of TV shows, still acting. And the last thing he was in is he played a character in the World's Greatest Tribute Bands, which is a TV show from 2014. But he's done a handful of things. And then we also have Gino Andrews, who honestly, I don't really know anything about, except that he's been in some other direct-to-video films. And then Sam Mann, who played, I think he might have played the drummer, who was probably the most charismatic, the sort of funny one, but I'm not 100%. But he is also in Rollerblade and from '86 and Rollerblade Warriors, which we're going to do, and the Rollerblade 7, the third follow-up. We're going to do these movies at some point. If you didn't know that the 80s had like this craze, short-lived craze of rollerblades, not roller skates, rollerblades, not roller derby, rollerblades. This was the thing, just rollerblades. I think because it had the word blade in the title, and because they could make them out of multicolored plastic, it totally took off. And so they made these post-apocalyptic warrior films about rollerblading warriors, and Sam Mann was in all of them, and they're beautiful. We will talk about them at some point. If you see them on a shelf, snag them. But that was Sam Mann. And then also Mick McMains is in this movie as well, and he's a musician, and he's still making songs. He had a song come out last year, Since I Started Loving You. So there are actual musicians involved in this. The music itself is written by a successful musician. I don't, again, Paul Sabu is the name of the musician who wrote all the music. It was one man. He's written a lot of stuff. He was also on some interesting ones. He was on the Trick or Treat soundtrack, the original '86 one, been in a million soundtracks. He also wrote an episode of Kids in the Hall, or like a skit, which kind of blew my mind. So good on that. And I don't think the music is poorly written. It's just not as metal as I would have wanted it to be.
It's not hard. It's barely rock. And this movie's only kind of zombies. That's
True.
That's the way I sum
True.
it up.
And can we talk about, I know, Greg, I'm going to get to you in a second. Can we talk about when they come back from the dead, their faces are painted? And
yeah, they turn into Kiss.
They turn into Kiss. Like at first, like Jesse's looks almost like it might be corpse paint, like you're going to get into a little Alice Cooper-y thing. But then like you look at the other ones, and yeah, like when they came back to life, like, oh, you're half like Ace Frehley, you're Catman on one half. You're like, it literally, and part of the problem, and this is a pacing thing too, as you said, Tad, the characters are kind of charismatic. They're at least entertaining to watch bumble around. But when they become zombies, which is in the half mark of the movie, they don't speak. They don't do anything. They're robots that walk with their arms in like a staccato motion.
I have to say, I love that dancing. Their walking was the highlight.
It is. Greg, when you saw this, what was your expectation? How did it go?
Well, after you recommended Troma's War, I've basically been like, I don't know what could happen. This wasn't quite up there in terms of what am I watching. But, you know, I'd say that this reminded me a lot of the first time I saw The Room, where I ended it and I'm like, you know, I think I enjoyed myself, but I can't in good conscience recommend that to anyone ever. So,
yeah, of course, the reference to Tommy Wiseau's The Room, friend of the pod. Yeah, so this movie, it is just an experience, I think is a good way to categorize it. Because the first, and what Tab was saying when he said both he and I saw it and was like, oh, this is better than I remembered it. When I first saw this film, I was less well-versed in super low budget, obscure 80s and 90s ephemera, shot on video, that sort of thing. Now, being much more well-versed in that, there is a plot to this movie, and for the first half of it, it actually follows the plot. And there's a lot of elements. I mean, almost every element in here is taken from other movies of its ilk. So it was easy to follow, but it's that halfway mark when it becomes a skit show, essentially. And you follow different groups of people at different times, some of which you may or may not know or may not be the same people. It turns into the final 20 minutes of Rocky Horror Picture Show, where you're like, was Richard O'Brien even there? Like, I mean, I know he's on screen, but I don't think he was watching anything happening. It's so insanely crazy. There's so much going on. It's almost paralyzing to pick something to talk about.
The problem is, and you mentioned it, is the main characters die and there's nobody to pick up the slack in terms of like characters. There's nothing left. Everyone's a zombie or it's random randos.
The manager is the only one that comes through, and he basically shows up just to remind us that there's a plot and to remind the rest of the cast that there's a plot. And then they move to a plot scene, and then it veers from him again.
I was personally living for the bigwig record producer who you keep cutting back to him halfway through, and like he's watching the zombie band do their set,
yeah, right.
And he's all for it. He doesn't care what's happening. Like the Nazis show up and are storming the stage, and like people are fighting. And he's like snapping his fingers, like, yeah, groovy, I dig it. Like,
can we talk about the fact that when he shows up, he makes a joke that there's no audience because, of course, the show is canceled, but also they're under siege by ghouls, right? Yeah. So he's the only one in the audience, but he brings a fucking bag of props with him. He sits down and he pulls out like a picture of his wife, we assume, and like it looks like some sort of mixed drink. I thought he was going to do an oil painting. There was so much shit on the table. And then he has a phone. He brought in a corded phone somehow to sit next to him to talk throughout the performance to another guy.
How do you know that he's successful in the 80s if he doesn't have a phone he carries around?
It was the most like
if you pulls out a bottle of pills and takes a bunch of pills in the middle.
It was too real. And let's talk about the scene. So so he of course eventually is killed. The band plays their set, and then he's trying to give them a $1 million or $2 million contract, something crazy like that. And they're going to think, and he's like, $2 million
in like today's money. I think it was $500,000.
$500,000, that's what it was, 500,000.
In today's money, it'd be a lot more.
Yeah, impressive. I'd take it now. Okay, even my cut. But he's like
$500,000. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to give it to me, join the Patreon. But he's like, he eventually gets killed, and then he's still apparently sitting. He goes back to sit in the audience, and the manager shows up to try and find Jesse and the band because he needs them to save the underage girl that they're planning to have raped by ghouls, because that's how apparently ghouls work. And he shows up and he's like, man, I can't believe you're here. And he tries to sell him, like he tries to start to spin a yarn to be like, well, this is what's going to happen. And he's like, it doesn't matter. The band's dead. I can't pull your leg. Then he gets attacked, realizes the guy's a zombie. And as he's running away, he's like, you're a hack and everybody knows it. And like, it's that sort of weird moment where they have to throw in jokes that some of them actually end up landing.
Yeah.
Like, I liked the one, and maybe it's because I'm in Southern California, but I like the one where the random townspeople are looking through old books trying to figure out how to get rid of the ghouls. And this old timer, because apparently this Midwestern town has some town elders, as if that's a thing in the US. And they're like, you have to find a virgin, stake her to the highest hill in town, and then the ghouls go ravage her, then they devour her, and then they go to sleep for 100 years, and then it's someone else's problem. And one guy's like, that's an old wives' tale, which, by the way, no, it's not. That is not a wives' tale. No wife has ever said that. But then the nerdy guy reading a book, they don't have names because we don't know who the fuck they are. He says, no, it's true. They did it in Los Angeles. And the other guy looks at him and goes, where would they find a virgin in Los Angeles? And I loved that line. And then he's like, well, it was 1890, which again is another funny thing because it implies that there's going to be a zombie uprising in Los Angeles in 1990. And it's just that sort of thing where it reminded me of, as you, I think, mentioned it before, that writing movies in high school, where everybody like had these ideas and you just throw it in a mixing bowl. There's a scene where the town intellectual says that ghouls hate heads, literally people's heads. That's why they're tearing them off. And so what we need to do is wear giant heads, i.e. framed prints of Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, which I don't know what thrift store they raided, okay? And you have to put them in front of you, and then you can just walk by and the ghouls won't care. Well, obviously that didn't work, and there's a street just littered with heads after that. And then you have a woman who's fights off one of the little, people ghouls, but her boyfriend is decapitated, and then she spends the movie running after the decapitated head and carrying it with her.
Are you okay? Like, she's talking to the head and like like, are you okay? You're talking to a severed head.
And then, which is moderately funny, even when she becomes a ghoul, like she still carries it around. But then you have even insaner things like the little girl, like she's like, I have to use your phone. You're like, it's dripping. So she has to leave the head outside, follow this woman into her house. The little girl picks up the severed head and drop kicks it out of frame. What?
This is just one of those movies where it's so much more fun to talk about than actually watch. Once you're done watching it, you can spend hours talking about this film. By the way, Nate, I'm glad you mentioned Winger, because that girl, the underage girl, pops up, and the first thing I do, because my wife's watching this, is I go, she's only 17. And my wife goes, there's no way she's 17.
No, she's supposed to be young in this. And they write a song about it. Her name's Sophie, right, in the song? And they write a song. Cassie. I'm going to write a song about you.
Aren't the lyrics like, oh, like, baby, you're so young, but I'm in love?
Yeah, it's great. And Cassie's played by Jennifer Coe, C-O-E, who she was in like an episode of Falcon Crest. I don't know if she acted hereafter. She actually does a fine job. She's just an 80s kid in there, sort of the weird, like, like a Mormon-looking little girl. And I don't...
Baby, I'm going Mormon because I'm making you all my wives.
That literally is in this movie. That is a line in this movie. But here's the thing that's crazy, right? In the beginning, it's almost sort of cute, right? Like, because it seems almost like Jesse's character, the lead singer, like he's just kind of being nice to her and sort of teasing her to be like, this is cute. Like, this little girl has a crush. Because, like, in the beginning, he sees her and she warns me, like, you're a weird kid. Don't you want an autograph or something? And she's like, I have to go. And he's like, weird kid. And then he sees her again. And he's like, hey, like, what are you doing? And then she gives him money to bail him out of jail when they're locked up by the town sheriff, who locks them in what I guess is a hay barn with bars.
Yeah, it's a barn.
They locked them in a barn. I don't understand what that was.
They can't afford a jail.
She hands them money, and it's sort of cute, right? Like, I was like, okay, it seems like he's just maybe... like if I were a 15-year-old, in the 90s, and Cindy Crawford, and I went to see a talk, and she blew me a kiss. Like, that's cute, right? Like, she's not going to sleep with a 15-year-old. But that was a key. It would have made me like lose my mind, right? That's cute. But then, no. Then he does full-fledged fall in love with her. And that is creepy as shit. Her dad had the right idea. Get her out of there. Get that creepy pedophile with the mustache out of town.
Get the fuck out of town, Pecker.
Yeah, that was another line. Very quotable. And so that was just super uncomfortable. And then, the song. And it's also like it's the 80s equivalent of the song from Jennifer's Body.
He did say that he wanted it, that they should be there until death do they part. And he does die, like, a short time later.
And she pledges her undying love to him.
Yes. Forever and ever.
That is a sad life she will have forever, because I don't think EJ Curse is the top of the food chain to aim for.
At least the movie ends on a cute note where, like, she can always go back to his grave and he's still there and he gives her the engagement ring. Like, he still responds to her. Yeah, it's depressing, like, hey, my corpse fiance. Like, he pops his hand out every once in a while and reminds me he's there. It's cute and depressing at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think it's just downright gross.
It was just holding hands.
Holding hands.
That's what you do when you're in love, is you hold hands.
You hold hands. It's real gross. It's real gross. I'm not going to lie. Real gross.
So uncomfortable. I was just like, I don't understand what's going on here. I don't know why they decided to make this.
We have multi-generational, like, cuckolding scenes. You have, it's like you took Rocky Horror, Return of the Living Dead, and Lolita and threw it in a blender, poured half of it in the sink and filled the rest with water. Like, that's what this film sort of feels like.
That's about right. It's got everything. Literally everything.
They threw everything in here. And let's listen to this clip. So this is what is his name? The gentleman who played Hitler, and give him props because I don't know what kind of like balls. It's a man. I think it's. I don't even know that he's credited as Hitler in the thing, which is interesting. Yeah, he is. It's Jack Bleisner. Jack Bleisner. And Jack Bleisner was in Crime Killer. He played the president in a movie called Crime Killer or Zeus in 1985 as well. I don't know why 1885 was his year, but it totally was. He commits 100%. He shouts lines from Mein Kampf throughout the whole thing. And then when he's Hitler, like after he's revealed himself, he's not just an old man, he's Hitler, and he becomes a zombie ghoul, he like half-heartedly Zig Heils the whole time. It's like one of those pecking bird toys that pecks water. Like his hand just sort of raises up, even when he's like trying to struggle uphill to get to the verge of sacrifice, his little arm. It's just, it's the.
Doesn't he sing as Hitler before he's dead? He sings that Disney parody song from that old Donald Duck cartoon, like "In the Fear's Face."
Yes, yes, he does.
Which I heard him start singing that, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, that is such an obscure.
It is obscure.
Of, like anti-Nazi propaganda,
and it's also probably still copyrighted.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So I don't know, but here's the thing though too. What exec at Disney is going to be like? Somebody stole this song. Oh, we're gonna go after him. What is it? Well, a guy dressed as Hitler. They're like, never mind. Just I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
Is it a song that we use in the park? No, then I don't care. I don't care.
Then I don't give a shit. Let's listen. This is one of my favorite jokes. So this is when they've killed the band. The manager has to know, I guess, but I mean he doesn't. I guess I don't know why. But he's at dinner with the matriarch, who turns out to be Hitler. He reveals at this dinner that he's Hitler, and all the family and the sheriff, who's in cahoots with them because apparently they pay for the town. I don't fucking know how that happens, but he offers him a job, and apparently the manager goes with them to this job, and that's where we see the boiler room, which is supposed to be a gas chamber, and he describes a blue gas and a yellow gas, where he basically screams that I think the blue gas fills your lungs with pus and piss, and the other one makes your head split open. I don't think this is how gases work, but he does that, and then the guy's like, "You're crazy," and this is what happens. Let's listen.
100.000 Deutsche, die zu Deutschland war, Deutsch ist Deutsch und bleibt Deutsch. Sieg heil! Sieg heil! Sieg heil!
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a Trump rally. No, I'm just kidding. Let's go back and listen.
Now admit that you were excited. Now will you accept my job offer? No, let me go! No! No! Let me go! An American is a youth. It is all the same, no ambition. Polluted blood. You will be the first we will eliminate. Shane's a nice boy.
That joke was that's the kind of thing Troma aims for, but so often, like so rarely hits. That was the perfect line for me. He's like losing his shit, screaming in German, saying, mixed blood. And then he's like, "Shame, nice boy." Like hilarious. So inappropriately hilarious.
Can I just point out that actor, let's see, Jack Bleisner, only has 2 credits: Hitler in Hard Rock Zombies, and the President of the United States in some film called Crime Killer.
Like I said, it's also in Zeus.
Yeah,
I know, right, and that's the thing, and that's why I'm pretty sure that much like he'll pull off his hat in this movie and become Hitler, Donald Trump will pull off his hat and become Jack Bleisner. I'm just kidding, Jack Bleisner. I would never say that to you.
I just one more quote from him before he reveals himself as Hitler, and he's still just old German man. He's caught in bed, and I wrote it down. I think like he's explained to his grandkids what he's doing, which is sex, but he says like "geschleppt, de fucking backen," or something, like just like absolute lunacy. Whatever he says, I feel like this movie is worth it alone for that insane fake German. Like,
sure. And I don't, it makes me wonder if a lot of the other German is fake, because I don't think it is. I do think they gave him, I do think they were like, here's some reels of Hitler, because it's kind of spooky. He actually sounds like those old recordings of Adolf Hitler. It's an unnerving thing, but it's just so batshit insane. There's nothing sensical about this film at all. It's a boiler room, not a gas chamber. There's a literal boiler. There's a furnace that he points at like it's a furnace, but then no, it's a gas. It just doesn't make, there's no sense whatsoever. I want to go to some of the things that I think are pretty good. Lisa Toothman, who plays Elsa, that is the murderous femme fatale of the Hitler family. She's also in Rollerblade Warriors, which was the second of the Rollerblade Warrior films. She was also in Witchcraft 3 in 91, Eyes of the Serpent in 94, a TV movie which probably aired on Lifetime because it's called Molested. She actually, I thought, was all right. And one thing I didn't know, because I'd seen her in like Rollerblade Warriors, I didn't realize she's clearly a dancer. She's actually very skilled. And there's a scene where the underage girl Cassie is in the audience, the empty audience, and behind her creeping up is Elsa's character, and she's already a ghoul. And she does this insane leg lift straight up to her cheek and holds it there to like spider step over the seats. And she does it like twice. I mean, my wife's a dancer and she's very flexible, and that is hard to do. So like that, I was like, and she does have tons of dancing scenes in this where she just like is dancing for no reason. She does a lot of dancing around people while other ghouls kill people. She also, for fans of disturbing and sometimes sexy schlock, she has a topless scene in a shower. She also gets bottomless in the first like 5 minutes of the movie, which is always kind of a rarity because topless is so much easier. But she doesn't take her top off right away. She takes her pants off, which, hey, kudos to her. And that's totally like 80s-ness. Like this is 80s direct-to-video glory. Like drive-in is dead for the most part, and they're moving to the video store, and that's exactly where this one is like, yep, I'm sure it was rented a ton. I'm sure tons of tapes wore out. It's one to watch as an experience. So the songs. Well, let's listen first. This is Lisa Toothman in the beginning. So it opens with two random strangers picking up her as a hitchhiker. She sits on their laps as they're driving. I guess there's no stick shift in this stick shift car. And they then she directs them to pull off at a lake. She strips down. She goes in the lake nude. One of the guys follows her. They both follow her, presumably. One of the guys are there, and then she drowns him, but blood starts spraying out of the water. Okay, I'm like, all right. Her weird little like brother lover is taking photos from the other bank. And then after she drowns the guy, she turns around and the other guy has also gotten naked and gotten in the water, but he's just facing the other direction, like 20 feet away, like, I don't know, like enjoying the highway view. I don't understand what that was about. Because then she drowns him. I'm like, that, you have no survival instinct if that's the case. I mean, this guy would have grabbed the third rail because he has no feeling. Like, that's the sort of thing. I don't know how this was supposed to happen. So right away, you know that plot is not important here because no reality or logic is involved. And that's in the first 5 minutes. Then we get this scene shortly thereafter where, actually before this scene, so after the intro, then we see the band play. They play some soft rock pseudo hit. And then they get off stage, and there's all these women screaming in the crowd, whatever. They get in the locker room. They undress down to their extremely tighty-whities. The drummer is in a red thong. And their manager is he's like, go out and talk to the girls. We got to get pictures with girls. You have to have those because that's what the labels want to see, that you're popular with the girls. And they're like, no. Like, no. They don't want to see this entire auditorium of young women who want to throw themselves at them. And so the manager's like, all right. And he opens the door and women flood in. And like they have them, it's another sexy scene. They have like them signing their breasts, signing bare butts. Like it's moderately titillating for the 80s, but the lead singer is disgusted. He's like, oh, I don't want any of this. This is crazy. And then I'm like, what, are we supposed to then believe it's because he only wants girls when they're 13 years old? Like, I don't understand how that was then supposed to play with like 3 minutes later when we get to this scene, which I'll play us, when Lisa Toothman is picked up on the highway and they're all like, yeah, like she's hot. I'm like, there were like 30 women taking their clothes off for you and you were not into it. But some woman sweating on the highway in Southern California for God knows how long, that's what you want? I didn't get it. But here's this. It's Lisa Toothman and the rest of the band. And this is probably the most awkward conversation ever captured on film.
You live around here?
Not far.
Last night some little girl told us to stay out of here.
Strange town. Strange little girls.
Strange big girls.
Maybe.
Why'd you want us to stay out?
Can't imagine.
Is this town kind of weird or something?
Nothing weird here.
Okay, strange town. Anything weird here? Nothing weird here. I'm like, what alien wrote this script? And I don't think that there was a script. I think that's part of it. I'm not sure there was, because people, I think there were ideas and then they told them what to do. And then they were like, okay, that was good, but this time try to do it like you're an off Broadway, low rent Mel Brooks. And that's what we got.
We have $15 for the day. We only have 2 takes. Get it done.
This is one of those where I'm pretty sure most people were not paid. But I will say this one had a little more, but it must have had some budget because they did have multiple sets. They had blood spray quite a bit sometimes. The scene where the big, bold, leather-facey guy gets stabbed through the throat by the Jesse zombie. Then he comes to and kills Cassie's dad, but he's pinned by his throat to the wall. And he keeps trying to reach for him, and he can't get there. And the guy's not facing him; he's smoking a cigarette, facing the camera. And then finally, he gets out of it. He goes, and then he takes a bite of him, and he has to spit it out because he can't swallow because there's a knife in his throat. So then he has to remove the knife. That, to me, that was kind of genius, and it really, I think that's what you're saying, Tad. The promise was there, but there was so much extra shit. Like if they edited it down, but then also made it a little more polished, like they could have spent more time.
Would have. There was so much time wasted on music videos that had no business being in this film. This wasn't. So my wife was watching this with me, and she said, "This is like Head of the Family, except really crappy."
That's a good thing, and I liked Head of the Family quite a bit, but it's true. It's not polished in any way, shape, or form, and it does have a charm in that way. But it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, I know they looked at this and said, should we cut this 10 seconds out? And they're like, that 10 seconds of film costs us $3. And they're like, all right, we're leaving it in. And listen, so because we've mentioned the music so much here, here's a clip of some of the better music. And you hear clinking because this is when Joe McJackass, the record producer, is in the audience. I don't know, mixing a drink. He's dancing with a phone while no one's on it. It's a weird scene. Yeah, it's like he's playing the kettle drum with a fork. I don't know what he's doing, but so that's one of the better bits because it's more rock. And then the other ones, it's like if you took the Scorpions' Winds of Change and then had it rewritten by, I don't know, one of those Muzak companies that made like elevator music, and then you had the doorman of that elevator sing it.
There's so many songs in this movie that are literally like that. The Cassie song is just "I'll Be Watching You" by the Police, except shitty.
Yeah, it's way shittier, like way shittier. If any Sting fans out there, don't get your hopes up. It's not even third rate on that level. And again, Paul Sabu actually has some great music. So it's just, he had to write how many tracks for this album? I mean, for this movie, and you can find the soundtrack out there. It does exist. So we've come to the conclusion here of our discussion of Hard Rock Zombies. I'm going to start with you, Greg. Who would you recommend Hard Rock Zombies 1985 to, and why?
I mean, to go back to what I said originally, if you want a viewing like The Room, where you just kind of leave just changed in fundamental and horrid ways, I'd say go for that. On the flip side, if you've been listening to us and you're like, I don't think I can stomach this, but I like the premise, consider watching that 2015 short film Kung Fury instead. It's got a little bit of crazy 80s. It's got Hitler. I mean,
that's true. And if you're one of the ones lucky enough to kickstart Kung Fury, then you will enjoy that. And there is also, just so everyone knows, for fans of Kung Fury, there is a Kung Fury 2, which I think might be feature length. And it's actually supposedly got Schwarzenegger, Michael Fassbender, some real interesting people in it. David Hasselhoff's got a bit. So keep your eyes open for that. It's already done principal photography. So
that should be good.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Mandy, who would you recommend Hard Rock Zombies to and why?
Oh, I would really only recommend this to two types of people. People who really like hot garbage movies, like that's your thing. Like they're out there, right?
I feel very attacked.
Right? Like call it out. No, but like, that's pretty much what it is, as we've just discussed for like the last hour. So, and then also people who are feeling nostalgic for like the Indian restaurant they used to eat lunch at every day that always had the Bollywood like musicals playing, like, on the TV on the wall, like me. I don't know. I actually I wrote down in my notes that I really liked the music montages, because they were like little music videos like in the middle of the story, totally. And broke it up, which is very much like the Bollywood that you mentioned.
And it's 80s law also. If you have metal in the title or hard rock, if you have rock in the title, you better have something that you could just chop on either side of the film and have a music video for.
Yeah.
Tad.
So that's it.
Yep. That's exactly. And I'm going to jump on you, but Tad, who would you recommend this film to and why?
I wouldn't recommend this film. Honestly, actually, if you're listening, you've already gotten the gist. This film is far more interesting to talk about than watch. I don't recommend watching this film. You could watch Dead Alive. You could watch any full moon video. The Head of the Family, watch that instead. Watch Bad Channels. And if you just want it, actually, that's even better, because Bad Channels reminds me of how much better that soundtrack was. Touching Myself Again. It's a fantastic song. Everyone should listen to it.
So if you don't know that reference, go back and listen. I believe it's episode 6. Listen to our Bad Channels and Coneheads review, where I talk about how much I hate the song Touching Myself Again. It's bad.
Still listen to it like at least once a month.
I do have that soundtrack. It's a fantastic soundtrack. Blue Oyster Cult did the orchestrals, and that's not this movie. So that gets to me. Who would I recommend this to? Two types of people. Recommend it if you want to make low-budget indie films. This is a good example of how you can kind of do whatever you want and mash it into a film. And also an experience of how if you don't cut out enough, it's going to be real slow and draggy. The other group of people, if you like 80s trash films, like Mandy said, this movie is sort of the king of the trash film. If you watch Miami Connection, which is phenomenal genre mash, that is a much more effective and well technically produced film, but this is very much on the horror side of it. When you think of like an 80s action film, you think, hey, it's been produced with a little money. That's sort of Miami Connection is to the high budget 80s action movie what Hard Rock Zombies is to the 80s horror movies, where there's already no budget, so you get to ultra low budget. Give it a look. If you don't like being zoned out by hour 2, you're not going to make it through this movie. You might enjoy some Lisa Toothman TNA and a little bit of Hitler, but then you're going to go to Snooze Town. So
I was going to say, if you need your Hitler parody fix, go back and watch The Ultimate Fight. Highly recommended. One of my favorite movies of all time.
Ultimate Fight, 1993, Ernie Reyes Jr., also known as The Process. Great film. All right. That's it for us today on Cult and Classic Podcast for rock and roll murder. I'm so excited that we got to do these movies. Thank you so much, Tad Mastroianni, Amanda Longley, Greg Johnson, and I am Nate Wyckoff. To play us out, as always, is The Chud with All About Evil. And I want to let you guys know one more time, join our Patreon at patreon.com/Cult and Classic Podcast. For $1 a month, you can support us, get a bunch of extra stuff. Also, you can give us a little more and get cards, autographed custom trading cards, as well as zines every month. And the clips used in this podcast are the property of the owners of the films. They're used for review purposes only. Thank you guys so much and be kind. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.